says whenever she sees a hummingbird, it's my grandma. And so what I'll kind of do is I'm going to offer an in-between song. So technically, this is not the formal welcoming. Feel free to type that into the chat when new bodies start entering, because they don't see the chat previously. I'm going to offer an in-between song while people are wandering in, and then it'll go for a couple minutes, and then, yeah, I'll let my amazing facilitators, co-facilitators, beings of gatherings, and awesome badasseries say hi officially. But a quick little in-between song while beings are wandering in. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Oh.
Oh.
Welcoming in song, and it's nothing formal, it's just an in-between song. So I'm glad people are rolling in. Let us know where you're coming from. Singing some cool ones. Yeah. Awesome.
We got some folks here from the Okanichi band of the Saponi Nation in Durham, North Carolina. We got some folks from the Coast Miwok, Grattan Rancheria. Got some folks from Huchin, from Unceded Keys Nation, Tongva, SoCal, LA, Pueblo of the Tortugas land, the Indi people's land, Las Cruces, New Mexico. Okay.
So yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, welcome, y'all. So this is our first gathering, our first new moon training, and we are honored today to have Canyon Coyote woman Sayers-Roods with us to help us wrestle, to introduce us to her work, her powerful work as a cultural representative and a Native monitor, as an artist, as a facilitator and educator, as a healer, as a community builder. We're here to wrestle with how we be in a good way on Indigenous land, each of us, and how we reconnect to our indigeneity. And Canyon is up to all sorts of things in this world, in this community, on these lands here. So we're so excited to listen and to learn. Tabi, would you like to add anything before we pass it over?
I would just reflect something that Kenyon has spoken in terms of like caring for ourselves, making sure we stay hydrated, any movement that you need, any breaks that you need, just making sure that you're watching your own bodies, caring for your bodies, like staying hydrated. If you need anything, just taking care of yourselves during this class, in this training.
So thank you. You put it amazingly. I do struggle boasting about myself, but I have no problem boasting about the work.
Okay, you froze.
And the space.
That's Zoom life.
Zoom life.
Yeah.
Canyon, say that again. We need to hear that again. No problem about boasting about the work. You froze right there. Maybe boast a little bit.
I struggle with bragging about myself, but I have no problem bragging about the work that I do and the beings that I connect with and the spaces that I have access to and privileged to be in. I will proudly share that. Oh, yeah. It's a happy reminder. Mishmin Tuhis, good day. Conrakat Canyon, Coyote Woman, Sayers-Roods. Nice echo. I come from Indian Canyon Nation, the only federally recognized Indian country between Sonoma and Santa Barbara along central coastal California. That being said, I am a daughter of tribal chairwoman Anne Marie Sayers. And I recognize how privileged I am to have been raised on the land of my ancestors, where my grandmother's grandmother's grandmothers have always been from. I am especially privileged, and I recognize how blessed and lucky and beautiful an upbringing has been, where culture sharing and learning from Indigenous pedagogies and where Indigenous protocol has always been acknowledged and respected. Now, Indigenous protocol is a form of protocol that we acknowledge that when we are not on the land of our ancestors, we are visitors. And it depends on the intent of the visitors of how they're going to walk and proceed. If you're visiting and you want to take over, well, then you may attack and you may steal and you may burglarize. Because I'm going to use the analogy of when we follow a protocol today, when we visit our neighbors and we want to borrow a cup of sugar, do we walk right into their kitchen and take it? Or do we follow some interesting set of rules, a common accepted social norm, a social culture of recognizing that, oh, I'm not in my house, and this isn't my door, and this isn't my kitchen, but I do want what's in it. And well, I might want to learn from my society, from my environment, how to navigate that. There's a protocol of knocking on a door and then seeking a consensual, healthy dynamic. And then finding out if they have sugar in the first place and if they want to loan it or borrow or share or gift or however one may proceed. Now, Indigenous peoples around the world have always held and acknowledged Indigenous protocol as a form of interaction. There's different forms of protocols traditionally around the world, but the common one is you acknowledge the territory that you're on. And sometimes it means meeting the community of the land. That was a common traditional practice when there were less beings occupying the space. Now today we have these things called land acknowledgements. And I'll acknowledge the land that I'm on. Right here, right now, I am in Mutsun Ohlone territory. I'm relatively close to my homelands because I am in Hollister. Indian Canyon is south of Hollister. And so I invited community as they join this chat and join this conversation to feel free to type what you know of your territory, such as acknowledge the land that you're on. And there's that website, native-land.ca, that is an amazing resource. And so feel free, and I invite you, whenever you have other gatherings, whenever you are participating, add that into the conversation, anywhere you go. Because, and I understand some places it might be challenging. Some places are, well, like maybe some meetings, they don't want you to interact. There is no chat box to interface with. But when you can, please offer it wherever you can, because visibility matters. Our education system has not taught us. And so part of Indigenous protocol, part of culture sharing opportunities is that I offer a part of me that is true. And I was raised by my mother, and her mother taught her that when song, ceremony, and dancing stops, so does the earth. I too believe that. So I want to offer a song, and this is a grandmother song. Now, to acknowledge that this song came to me differently than it was taught. And so I always acknowledge that it's Canyon's grandmother's song. And I'm going to use my regalia as an instrument because this is my medicine. Singing is medicine. Prayers are medicine. Us gathering in the circle is good medicine. We are in community. And all these Zoom meetings, we're practicing some intriguing rituals and practices, right? Pattern, coming together. Where are our times that we come together to sing or dance? So we're following other protocols of the economy and following other strategies of gathering and social norms and patterns. We're in classrooms and we raise our hands. So I'm going to offer this grandmother song to honor our grandmothers, their grandmothers, and in all Mother Earth. For without them and without her, we would not be here. We share this time and space together for a reason. So it's with that humility, that gratitude, that present-mindedness that I offer this song here today. You're welcome to say, oh, it's the end of the song, at the end of powerful statements, it's the equivalent of the snapping and the applause and the clapping. It's quite abrasive, especially in our communities. So, oh, is a good way. And so this is Canyon's grandmother's song. Moi moi o kawana, moi moi o ka, moi moi no ho, moi moi o ko, moi moi o ne ya tale, moi moi yo konale, moi moi o kawana, moi moi o ko, moi moi no ho, moi moi o ko, moi moi o ne ya konale, moi moi yo konale, moi moi o kawana, moi moi o ko, moi moi no ho, moi moi o ko, moi moi o ne yo konale, moi moi yo konale. No son and oh. Awesome. So I am here to offer perspective on many topics, on many energies, because we're here to talk. Well, I'm here for sure. And I mean, I've read some of the documents that we're posting. So I mean, like, I think we're here for decolonization. I think we're here to uncolonize the methodologies of which we've been taught and interact with the world and start thinking about re-indigenizing our approach. Because I say re-indigenize, and it's like, well, what kind of word is that? And decolonize, because like break apart, breaking down and the understanding of how things came to be. Because even our Western science validates the, what is it? The, wow, something theory. Whoa, that word just left me. Okay, fine. We're not going to talk about that right now. We'll get into it later. Sorry. When it comes to a colonial mindset and colonial way of thinking, it's not all just like horrible and bad, because guess what? I would not be here had colonization not occurred. I would not be this being who's trying to fight this had it not occurred. I would not be this being who has these lived experiences, both beautiful and horrendous and painful and traumatic, had these occurrences not occurred. I would not be this being had all nations not come together like they have. And I would not be this being whose traumatic historical past lingers in the lands and in my blood and in my mind. So it's beautiful because it's not black and white. It's the in-between, it's the gray area, it's the struggle, it's the challenges. And so as vehemently and passionately as I am a person who is mad at colonization, who's frustrated by it, because it's not that I'm mad about the historic atrocities, it's how we engage with it today. It's how we move forward or attempt to navigate going forward. Because I tend to say, if you are in a position of power or decision-making or anything where you have means of impacting the environment, educating the next generation or anybody, public interfacing or educational practices, make a decision about forward thinking, momentum, technology, anything that's going to impact how we go forward. If you do not know the history of the land that you are on, or how we came to be here, how we are today, Like, why is the city where it is? Why it's named the way it's named? Or don't see people in these communities? Why aren't there natives around? Why aren't there these other communities around? Why don't we do things back then the way they are? We don't know these things, these layers of history. Do you really think we are as informed as we could be when it comes to impacting the environment going forward, the community going forward? Because simply put, building a building. Oh, I want to build it here because it's going to help the community now. Do you know if there was a building here in the past? Do you know if someone's buried under the ground? Do you know that this might be a flood territory? Do you know that fire has impacted this land for hundreds of years? Do you care? Do you care about the longstanding presence of this building? Do you care that the soil beneath that building will never feel the rain or feel the sun? Do you care that the building might be produced by products and materials that are consumed and engaged with not so healthy regulation, so slave labor or exploitation of other nations? Do you know how much it took to get to you? Do you care? These are things that aren't taught in our schools and in our environment. Some community members consider these because of their experiences or exposure to other cultures and other communities. And it's not that we're wrong here right now. It's that we may not be as informed as we could be, but it's also how we walk, because some people might be very informed, very educated. And I'll use the example of a 19-year-old PhD student who is well studied on the soil mycology of carbon-based systems and is a PhD at 19, right? Knows all the amazing technology of soil sampling, moisture, and all of these elements. So probably can tell you the variance that it would take to create ideal conditions to grow things. And then you have a fourth, fifth generation farmer, not a lick of Western scholarly education or access to academia. And he could lick his hand. And he's learned how to converse with people about the percentage of the humidity in the air, the moisture. He knows where the water is. He knows that the women in his community also shared very much beautiful knowledge. Happened to default to man because it's been ingrained in me. Apologies, I will try and bring in more female and non-binary beings into my conversation in the future because I am tired of the default of man. Sorry. My pronouns, she, they, coyote. As we converse with each other, and if we choose to make reference to conversations, like if you go forward and you have a conversation saying, oh yeah, she just had a great conversation. Yes. Oh yeah, what they were talking was wonderful. Yes. Oh my gosh, coyote is a badass. Yes. Feel free. So don't need to virtue signal in correcting people. However, I do want to encourage you to inform other people when they are misgendering people that they all know. Because when people aren't in the room, how are you talking about them? Because my community has been called savages and primitive, dirty, vile beings. And just because someone is being civil in the moment in front of everybody, when I leave the room, or when the important beings that whoever judgment is supposedly valid, when they leave the room, how are people acting? Because if they're not acting the same way that they supposedly claimed they were when they attempted to correct a pronoun or use one respectfully while the person's in the room, how are they showing up authentically? And how are we holding them accountable? I'm not saying punish them. I'm saying, how are we holding our community accountable? Because these lessons are not to be taught by one person. These lessons are not to be taught by a teacher. There's not going to be a president who's going to solve problems. There's not going to be a mayor who solves the city's problems. It's all going to be interpersonal, introspective accountability, every single one of us. because, well, simply put, I'll use an example of my community. I was raised in Indian Canyon, where ceremony and culture sharing is a default. Now, that being said, I can go up and down the road on my bicycle and know everybody. I remember when I didn't know somebody, and then I learned how I interface with them, and I asked them if they knew who my mother was, and they're like, no. I'm sitting here like, how do you not know the woman who made this possible? I was a very interesting coyote when I was youngster, and I came home crying. I was like, Mom, no, this person doesn't know you. She's like, I can't know everybody, but I'm sitting here like, all my life I've only known this. And this is my mother's backyard. They're a community who come to ceremony, and Indigenous protocol has them come to my mother with gifts and offerings, asking permission to be there. It's not that she charges money, it's that part of our community recognizes its humility, its accountability to recognizing they would not have this without her, and it's reciprocity. Offer what you can in that time if we're going to interact with each other. And so I remember feeling hurt and sad, but it was just me being me. But I've noticed over the years that Indigenous protocol hasn't been acknowledged. And there are more and more community members going to ceremonies that recharge their batteries, but they're not giving back. It's like they're going because they think they paid for a ticket. And if you pay for a ticket, you don't have to clean up afterwards. Think about buying a ticket to a concert and having a party at your grandma's. Grandma said, yes, it's okay that you can have some friends over as you watch your house, but are you going to invite strangers? Or are you going to invite the friends who might stay later or stay the night if they're trying to be safe and help you clean up? The ones who might bring something, the ones who recognize that it's not okay to move things disrespectfully. If they wanted room on the table, they would find out what's appropriate. But a ticket purchaser says, oh, I paid money and these services rendered are no longer my responsibility, or I need to care. So people go, oh yeah, this was great, it was delicious. Oh no, they're paid to pick it up. That's their job. And so I bring that up because I started seeing that in my own Indigenous community. I see that happening where Indigenous peoples go and recharge their batteries, but when do they give back? And it's not that I'm not saying like happens in my backyard where I'm like, they should give back. It's more of how are they accounted? Like, do all of their community know that they are on occupied Ohlone territory? Do they know how we're all coming here to be? Like, I'm not trying to say like, praise my Anne Marie mother for opening this land. No, they don't even have to do that. How are they acknowledging the ancestors of the land that we are on if they're coming for ceremony and wanting to pray for the people? Because the majority of Indigenous ceremonies I've ever participated in have been quite altruistic. A lot of prayers and ceremony have been outward towards other community members, outward towards the earth or land, outward towards the decisions around them, outward. And a lot of a new age energy is, I pray for wealth, I pray for greatness, I pray for opportunity, I pray for this, I pray for me, my, gimme. Now, it's not wrong to self-govern and pray for oneself. But what energy is going out into the world and how are we bringing it in? There is no right way to pray. I've ever learned. Beautiful beings of many faiths practice different ways, and I will respect them and their faith. Please do not shove it in my face. Please do not gauge admission. I hate that word. Missionary tactics in trying to recruit me. I don't need it. I will respect you for your beliefs. I will respect you for your practices. I personally may find them interesting, odd, or strange. However, it's the actions and interactions between beings that we can be respectful and healthy and set our boundaries. So please, indoctrinate me. And so when honoring chief and his may recognize my face or name, I offer a lot of land acknowledgements in the Bay Area. I am one individual who will be accountable for my actions. I respect many of my community members and I learn from them, and I am very humbled by them, especially when we converse on ways to amend our walks. That being said, I am from Indian Canyon. I am daughter of tribal chairwoman Anne Marie Sayers. who is daughter of Elena Sayers. I'm also daughter of Richard Roods, who has Euromud ancestry and Mohawk ancestry. So I identify with my matrilineal line being a California Indigenous Two-Spirit community member. And Two-Spirit is a misnomer, is a contemporary word that voices it as a placeholder for our Indigenous terms for our community members who did not identify as heterosexual, cisgendered individuals who held their presence in that standing of the community, i.e. a female-bodied female being who finds a male partner to have offspring. So in my community, those who were not holding that position in the community, we had the word two-face. And painfully so, now contemporary English language bearers already give a preconceived notion of the term two-face. Oh, that person's two-faced, ha ha ha. And it's hard for me to take steps to colonizing my mentality of having that indoctrinated truth or assumption or clarification or validation of that being an assigned definition. The same way words are given a definition like the word awesome, full of awe, the sum of awe. You do realize that that catastrophic train wreck or that car accident was awesome. And it's valid. And I'm not putting any emotion, oh my God, it's awesome. No. And so why are these words the way they are? Why do we act the way we do? And why do we feel the need to present what we know the way we do it? Such as when many people come to believe and understand that Indigenous peoples came from across the Bering Strait. Do you know how many times I have to combat humans who are not knowledgeable nor academically studied, who even know what that means? And I have to constantly battle my lived existence and my presence of voicing my ancestors have always come from this land. The Bering Strait theory has been debunked. Why is it that people grasp onto it? Well, you just came from the Bering Strait theory. You guys are Asian, you Mongoloids. I have to defend my existence to ignorance. So either I have to tap out of the conversation and the ignorance still lives, or I have to exhaust myself engaging, which I may or may not get anywhere, but the ignorance exists. And that's why I blame colonization, because we all have been deeply impacted by colonization. All of us, when you think about it, you honor your ancestors. Your ancestors' ancestors. All of us have Indigenous ancestry. All of us have ancestors that have Indigenous lineages from the land that they come from. All of our ancestors have had earth-based spiritual pedagogies and practices. All of our ancestors lived aligned with nature. And many nations formed practices around recognizing the rights of nature. Many of us recognized all sacred living systems. Some of our wounds are older and the cuts scarred, and it's harder to connect. But what's deeply important is that we take steps to honor truth in history. Honor the past to shape the future. We need to recognize that no matter where we are on historically relevant, beautiful Indigenous spaces everywhere. And there's beautiful histories and layers of histories where we walk and where we gather. And we've always been in community. And right now, as our nations combine and collect, and capitalism and consumerism and economically driven manifestations of truth, manifest destiny, patterns of systems that are there to exploit and profit and not prioritize communities. Where's our watersheds? Do you know? Do you know your bioregion? Do you know the microclimates within your bioregion? Do you know the time of the bloom? I'm not trying to say this to shame you, because I myself am still learning. I have to relearn my ancestral knowledge. I have to relearn my ancestral tongue. And as I connect with my language, I started to realize why I think the way I do. But in mainstream society, someone would say I'm neurodivergent. I suffer dyslexia. undiagnosed ADHD. I struggle focusing. I have all variant telltale signs of different manifestations of identities, labels, and intriguing elements. And I learned how to navigate the world quite uncomfortably in some areas, but I learned how to navigate the world and find my truth and find how I can attempt to be efficient. And efficient, I'm still questioning what that means and questioning the origin of what efficiency is, because like, what is a value? How do you value value? And so when I think about ways that we can honor truth in history, take steps to decolonize how we've been doing things, and take steps to re-indigenize, it's a lot of work and a lot of introspection, a lot of humility and accountability. I recognize that I have many privileges. I'm a female-bodied being. Therefore, the system of today's toxic patriarchy, I benefit and I also suffer. But there are variances. My mother, financially we were lower class, but she was mentally raised in a more upper class type environment. So she knew how to navigate the world with that efficiency and that value and that, I don't know, that prestige, that standard. So I got to understand how to code switch and the nuance of different thinking systems, different thoughts, processes, whatever, processes of thoughts. My mother has afforded me many opportunities and privileges to enter different venues. I could code switch academically. I would always go to like, I'm not academically trained, but I can talk about this topic because it's close to my heart. And over time I got better articulating myself. Oh, I'm so well spoken. Oh, gotta love those microaggressions, right? And so I learned how to synthesize my pain and frustration into a message. And it's not to be weaponized. I wish I could be that strong. There are some amazing beings out there that can just assert their boundaries, assert a truth, and just be unapologetic about it. I'm an empath. I catch other people's feels, so I'm freaking like delicate and helping people's fragility. And I use civility politics to tone police. And I'm sitting here like trying to also scream to the world, I hate civility politics, because civility politics will favor the unfavorable being, at least when it comes to equity, justice, or diversity. And even with those words, those acronyms, JEDI, are you part of the JEDI champion? Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Get your check item list off, get your certification. Is your business talking about equity? Are you diversifying your portfolio? So in these circles here in this Bay bubble, I tend to get a chance to witness all these different beings and conversations, and I'm feeling really lucky. And I recognize that that's a privilege that my mother has afforded me and given me access to, and help shape and shift and help me become who I've become, because without that access, without that opportunity, I would not be able to speak how I do. And how I speak how I do, wow, it's kind of like I'm being accountable. Huh. It's kind of like if I had my words written down, I would have to pursue something called a copyright. We have so many beings and we have so many systems to validate what can be validated. Where's our communal accountability? Think about these, I don't know, like let's just talk about predators. Let's just talk about unhealthy decisions of the community. You just la 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 la, I don't see it, la 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 la, bystander effect, la 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 la, I wasn't part of it. Where's our communal accountability? In our community, when I hear stories about the before time, before Western time, before contact, before colonization, before the concept of watching a watch, before time, some of my community members had shared with me that shaming was a part of a communal practice. And like, imagine if someone misstepped, they did something not so healthy, but not horrendous enough to validate truly wanting to get rid of them, but they commit something that's atrocious, the whole community could turn their back on them to let them know that they know and that they don't approve. They'd be able to turn their back to let that person know, and that person would have to work to be in community to gain that understanding and that respect back. And if they mess up again, and if they're sent off with the backs turned, our communities around California, around these areas, our tribal territories would know there's a reason why someone's traveling alone. We'll find out why. Conscious and aware. We don't have that now. So we have people who can be predators, who could travel along, engage, mess up, get in trouble, even be called out, and then they up and leave and wander around and they're alone again, and then they get that praise. And in the Bay Area, we have a lot of spiritual predators. In the Bay Area, we have a lot of exploiters of culture. Around the world, we have people suffering intergenerational trauma, lateral oppression, historical trauma, colonial violence. And what happens? Cycle repeats. Hurt people hurt people. Some of us because we don't even know. I've messed up. I've lashed out. I've accidentally been that person who got angry, the last straw, and then I'd lash out at the last thing that bugged me. I've hurt people. I try and do better now. And I will attempt to be accountable to those who I've ever hurt. So that door is always open. It's not like, oh, I shut that door. I'm not that person anymore. I don't have to deal with it. No. When it comes to accountability, that door has to remain open. Some things in the situations are not easy cut and dry. I messed up. I leave door open. People can inform me that I messed up and move on. There's a lot of wants there. There's a lot of crazy things that are going on in the world. I'm not saying it's easy. Not easy at all. I'm offering examples. My lived experience examples, to be precise, to the best of my ability, because I recognize my stories are my stories. And I will be respectful to other people's stories. I will still share my experience of other people's stories because they've impacted me and they've impressed upon me. So I attempt to be accountable in that. But that being said, we here in the Bay Area, we use the word Costanoan. Okay, what's that word? Costanoan. Oh, the Spaniards, when they came into San Francisco Bay. Costaños, when they came into the Monterey Bay. Costaños. We traveled up and down California to establish the missions. When they had the statistical evidence of Baja California, where they dramatically impacted over 80% of the indigenous population, when they knew that the missions would impact the indigenous population, they still chose to come and create said missions so they can convert, where they can baptize, where they can validate the beings' lives who are going to go to their belief of the Creator, so they can brag about their mission when they write back to Spain. They can follow the deep drive of Junipero Sierra, where they can establish other padres and Spanish soldiers who would rape and violate and torture indigenous peoples for speaking their language, for doing everything that they've ever done historically, they would be punished for. Oh, but we brought you culture. We wouldn't have the technology we have had these things not occurred. You wouldn't be as advanced as you are right now, is an argument I have to engage upon all my freaking life. And then when I see people frustrated and complain when indigenous peoples or even some of my Black community members will say, white people this and white people that, and then white community members say, that's a slur. There's going to take some time to be uncomfortable. We can't be perfect. We all nations have suffered from colonization and have benefited. We all are in this, and we all have diverse perspectives of which deserve to be accounted to. And they need to be taught and shared and acknowledged and not whitewashed and not swept under the rug before we could figure out how to go forward. So silencing the pain and hurt from community members saying, get over it, it's done with. That happened, that wasn't now. Oh, that person was a man of his time. These are not words that are helpful. Yes, it's painful to sit in the uncomfort to recognize that maybe some of our ancestors, even my own, were colonizers. And they perpetuated the position and system that we are in right now. The ones that people are suffering from and the ones that people are benefiting from. There's nothing wrong with people acknowledging their truth. It's painful and frustrating when there are people who are constantly in that state of hurt and lashing out that sometimes we get stuck there. And that's not the most productive. I'm not saying that because civility politics, I'll use an example. We have a silver-tongued, middle-aged male, white presenting, hair slicked back, lawyer or defendant of legitimate criminals, but because they have the money and he has the wits, he constantly wins and gets criminals off scot-free. And then on the opposite side, we have a passionate, strong-hearted, younger Black woman, and a crime was committed, and she's hurt by it. Her truth is being invalidated, and she's trying to defend. She shows up in court. Who does civility politics benefit? An emboldened, passionate, angry Black woman, or a silver-tongued, slick-haired, male-presenting, middle-aged, well-off defendant of rich criminals? Civility politics will want to tone police the Black woman, naturally. And it's frustrating because it's been ingrained and taught to us. We've been told that silencing ourselves or being articulate or being calm, cool, and collective is the most efficient when arguing a case, when being in the presence of legal systems, a governing structure, a foreign governing structure that happens to favor the Constitution when it comes to profiting off of the economy. When you talk about like economy-driven efforts, the Constitution will validate how the people can make the money and get the things that they want. And the people will be like, the Constitution, the Constitution. And then let's talk about some natives. Let's talk about the 18 unratified treaties of California. Let's talk about the broken treaties across the United States. Treaties are the law of the land. So says the Constitution. Oh my gosh, how selective, how convenient. Did you know that the United States government validated genocide in the 1850s during the gold rush, $5 a head, 50 cents a scalp, to eradicate the California native? But it was legal. Oh, but wait, if you just obey the officer and you don't give him a reason, and you didn't do anything illegal, you wouldn't get in trouble, you wouldn't be pulled over, you wouldn't have had to suffer those consequences if you just obeyed the law. Just obey the law. Huh, selective much? Maybe if you knew about these layers of history, you might be able to articulate an argument. I don't know. And so here in the Bay Area, Costanoan. And I said, I'm an Ohlone person, and we have Ohlone College. By name only. Do they offer scholarships to Indigenous people? Do they empower or hire many Native peoples to offset, the imbalance in our education system? Do they pay a land tax? I don't think so. But we want to honor you. Ohlone Herbalism Center. That the Native peoples of the land have never really appreciated. Interesting. Ohlone, The Ohlone Way is a book that was written by an individual in 1978. Oh, wait. 1978 was the first time that the Native American had the right to practice religion freely. You see, my humor and my sass is coming out because I am diabolically twisted, because I see the disgusting humor in this. So non-Indigenous people can establish their career by writing about benefiting off of the stories of Indigenous peoples. Now, for the sake of the author, I will disclose that I really respect and love Malcolm Margolin, who wrote the Ohlone Way. But we also need to acknowledge that he wrote the book not having talked to Ohlone people, not having known any existed, having relied on academic media and written materials, however valid and invalid because they were written by non-Indigenous peoples, not within the culture, and from everything that they were observing with their own limited lens. So he acknowledged that. And when he learned that there were more Native peoples, he amended his walk and he chose to work with more California Native peoples. He empowered Indigenous peoples. He created heyday books. He already had heyday books. He created News from Native California that encouraged Native peoples to offer stories, songs, pictures, all these things. Poems. Articles that he was raised in a system that didn't prioritize it. And he made that misstep. He wrote a book and he benefited off of telling a story of Indigenous peoples that he barely knew, but he was inspired by. That is what I find full circle. As sad and frustrating as, because when that book came out, my mother and another elder of the community, one elder of the community said, I think he's writing a book about this and he hasn't met anybody. What's he doing? I think he's cooking in the wrong kitchen. And I think my mother said, at least we got somebody in the kitchen. And so I'm sitting here like as angry as we could be at occurrences that are happening. Sometimes some things might be missteps. Over time, we might learn that something was a misstep. Like, I don't know, like Unipa Sierra. He got a bug bite that almost got infected. He had multiple messages from the universe that tried to stop him from coming, and he pushed through. Again, I would not be here had these occurrences not happened. So it was supposed to happen. But sometimes if we listen to the messages, maybe things might not have had a chance to happen. But yeah, when it comes to people growing, I love the story of Malcolm Margolin because he did that action and there was a lot of criticism. And after he learned, he took steps to learn, he started to learn more. And as he learned more, he started to recognize how he could play a role. So even in our missteps, we learn. And that's actually why I want to celebrate and highlight other beings, because as an Indigenous person, as a brown person, I can only offer my perspective. I could say it would be nice if non-Indigenous peoples did this. It would be nice if settlers did this. But you know what? If settlers told their story and talked about some of their missteps or the positives and negatives or the things that they learned from and shared with other people, I honestly think that some of those missteps won't happen again. Like, I really appreciate a friend of mine who was part of a gathering, which is another small name, so I don't want to name names. He didn't know about intertribal politics. And so he invited me and then invited another group and didn't realize that they didn't like me, or also they didn't like the idea of my having space at the event to represent the territory when I was the obvious person from a Southern territory and I was in their homeland. But the problem was the conversation wasn't along the way yet. I wasn't representing as a native from that territory, Oakland. I wasn't trying to represent Oakland. I was trying to say, as a California Native person offering perspective, I want to offer truth in history and recognize that we are in Huichin. We are in Chochenyo Ohlone territories, and that there are 3 active Native tribal groups that have full right to talk about and discuss the issues of their people and their lands, because they're the ones who should be talked to about it. I could offer insight about the California Native experience. I could offer insight about talking about these things, but the relationship with the Native peoples of the land still needs to occur. And I can't make that happen. It's the individuals who are going to proceed and go forward. I can offer insight. And so I recommend that if you get a chance, I have a few videos about Indigenous protocol, or I have land acknowledgement. Simply put, a lot of videos of land acknowledgements offering my song and other circles, and you might even see the evolution of how I speak and presenting information. And so I want to voice that I'm offering you a deeper insight than I do in a lot of other ones. And I'm catching myself not wanting to go to the default script, because guess what? The default script that I speak is already recorded. It's already present in the world. If you wanted to, or you wanted to hear it, you can go pursue it. You can go to my website and find written lists of books that are by Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples that are, I'll call them native vetted reading materials. Because it's one thing to be like, oh, I learned that I'm visiting San Francisco. I learned that it's called Costanoan. I'm going to Google Costanoan. Wikipedia is racist. Why? Even though it's provided by the people? Western settler science has, nope, the word's not here. Scientific theory. Scientific theory. Break apart, put together. Break apart, put together. Break apart, put together. If something is broken apart and put together, it's understood how it functions. It's beautiful to learn from. It's great. It is not wrong at all. It's limited. Why is it that placebo effect heals 30%? Holistic systems successful around the world, but scientific theory can't unlock it, uncode it, break it down, validate it. Therefore, if it can't be solved within its own system, we can't totally rely on it. So going back to Wikipedia, Wikipedia is created by beings who know their system. Now, I understand why it would be painful and foolish to validate how oral narrative could be a citable source, because I totally understand trolls and I understand the internet. What I'm saying this is Wikipedia will only validate written academic sources or news articles. So you can only cite other sources. So wait, if I say, I'm gonna offer this song and here's the definition of this song, and I try and type oral tradition, my ancestral knowledge, my community, and I'll find a way to get it vouched by the community. Wikipedia is saying, no, 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 no. But some new journalist who's never heard the word Ohlone before types it Allni and then says Canyon Sayers-Roods was at some blah, blah, blah college to offer a sacred indigenous land blessing that is meant to ward off the negative spirits. Conjecture. That person could cite my Wikipedia page and write a narrative about it. And that's valid. But my oral traditions and oral narratives, my stories that have been told from generation to generation to generation to generation, is not accountable enough. Interesting. I understand how it could be manipulated. I understand how it could be exploited. I understand how it's a lot of work to figure out how that won't happen or won't be encouraged to happen. But it's still problematic that something is validated, because I have to, the same thing with federal recognition. I have to work my tail off to prove who I am to a foreign governing structure. I have to defend and prove who I am to then validate my sovereignty. What? Interesting system we have in place here. So when I talk about these topics, if you go onto any of the pages, you might hear an issue that I see around cultural appropriation and exploitation. Now, I am tired of cancel culture. I'm tired of, yet again, colonizers tapping into something with a superficial notion and exploiting the hell out of it. And this is settlers, this is Black, brown, all beings, all nations. Western settler colonial mindset is pervasive among all people. I still catch myself. However, with that, I'm going to talk about, like, when it comes to cultural appropriation, it's not that you can't do this and you can't do that. It's how you're walking. One of my friends said, oh, if I wear moccasins, it's cultural appropriation. I'm like, no, if you wear moccasins that you purchased and then you lied to the world and said your sacred grandmother made them for you, or you say that you are some sacred shaman, that's when it's cultural appropriation. Or when you make a costume and you don't have a healthy understanding of the culture that you're borrowing or being inspired from. Like, how come is it that my community, my culture can be exploited and have a ton of costumes about it saying, oh, we're honoring you, yet if I found a legit mock-up or actually stole the legitimate garb of the Pope and I wandered around and said, do you like my costume? People would be upset. And then people don't walk up to the Pope and say, I like your costume. So why? Why is it different? Why? And it's because we've been taught and trained and conditioned in an environment that allows this behavior to be so pervasive. Oh, it's okay, we're honoring you. Or, oh, it's not that bad. Or, oh, we know that it's fake. It's all of these racial issues that are coming up right now. People are wondering, why? It's like, you don't know. Like, there's pain and we don't want to be silent. Silent no more. Wow, it sounds like idle no more. We don't want to be still. We don't want to be complacent. We don't want to take this because we're not happy with it. We didn't have this back in my day because no one was safe. We're all the indigenous peoples because it was illegal to be us. We had to lie. We had to hide, keeping the sacred secret. We had to allow our next generations to suffer for sheer survival. And then people have the nerve to talk down on us. No one here right now that is living did these things to me. However, they're benefiting from those systems and they're teaching ignorance and they're teaching misinformation and they are perpetuating a white supremacist culture. They are perpetuating cultural erasure. They are perpetuating dismissal of other lived experiences and perspectives. It's going to take all of us working together. It's going to take all of us learning as much as we can to talk about truth and history. It's going to be taking all of us to have those uncomfortable conversations. And it's okay to have diverse opinions. It's okay to come to healthy debate and legitimate arguments. It's okay to be from a different vantage point. There's nothing wrong with it. But, and how? And however, what are we doing to shift that system if we are recognizing that it has created problems or led to a problematic environment system situation? Because like, I'll bring up indigenous pedagogies. We were taught with indigenous pedagogies, we wouldn't have things like the Q cup existing because the person creating something for an economically driven motive, no matter how amazing or motivational that is, the consideration of the rights of nature and the consideration of a reciprocal, accountable, humble creation would have manifested within the own decision-making procedure of a being wanting to create something. Every time I try and want to say like create something, or when I've had exes who were kind of like business people, they're like, oh my gosh, you can make this and sell a whole bunch of that. And I'm like, no. They're like, why? That's a great idea. Everybody would eat that up. I'm like, are we mass producing it somewhere else? Like, well, where are the resources for that? Is that ink going to poison the water? Like, is it going to be done in another nation? What is the upcyclability? Like, am I just contributing to the manifestation of more material objects? What is the purpose? Is it, if it's just for self-promotion and selfish gain, is it really benefiting anything besides getting me opportunities? I'm not interested. So the Q cup exists and it doesn't have a second purpose. It's not biodegradable. Where does it go? And everybody caught on to it. Not everybody. A large group of people caught on to it and appreciate it's cool. But who does it serve? Serve as an instance of happiness? To what cost? And I myself, I consume media, I consume plastics, I drive a vehicle. I can't punish myself for benefiting in these systems, but I could do what I can within it. I'm speaking out against many things that are hurting the earth. I would love to vote with my dollar and support systems that are integral and accountable. We're not quite there yet. We will be, we can be if more beings become informed and take steps themselves. Those considerations, So by recognizing the rights of nature, actually go look them up, the rights of nature, go check them out. UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I might be talking all indigenous stuff, but guess what? You all have indigenous lineages. And we all are benefiting and living off of native lands. So how can we be good guests? How can we be good community members? How can we be good stewards of the land of these home spaces? How can we help our decisions support indigenous-led movements? How can we gather and educate the next generation to be accountable, reciprocal, and humble to the earth and recognize its kinship to nature? I get frustrated by saying the Western settler colonial mindset is divorced from its sense of accountability. Why? I don't know. Let me give an example of, in school, I'm taught about predators and prey. Okay, I'm taught that the population of the prey will be deeply impacted by the population of the predator. Okay, too big of a population of prey, predators will not be able to keep that population in check. The prey will overeat their ecological environment and they will suffer. Okay, that makes sense. Too many predators, not enough prey. They will out-eat their source of food and there will be too many predators and they will die off. Okay, humans who've been studying these occurrences think that they're not accountable, think that they're better than everything. Let's put a bridge here because we need to get to work. Let's put a building here because we need this type of shelter. Let's make this product over here that's single serving, single use, single garbage creating monstrosity. Let's do all this. Let's put a whole bunch of grocery stores in. Let's promote the truth that the assumption and the statement that we need all these big agricultural industries to support the nation because we're feeding the nation. We're feeding the nation. Let's make sure we dangle shiny across the street while we're throwing away food. Oh, because we're talking about the safety of the population, the FDA is going to tell us what's safe and what's not. Yes, I can understand how ham goes bad. There are things that we could do with it. However, I'm wondering why you're throwing away those nuts and those other packaged goods. I'm wondering why you're throwing away medicine that has been proven it will last, but we would rather prioritize regulation that says a business can take it at a loss, and let's not benefit the people with it. I understand why the FDA exists, so it's helpful. It's helpful because we want various forms of security within working environments. Some regulation is healthy. I get that. I understand that. Are all of the rules validated by care and consideration for the people or for the earth? Are all of those conducive towards recognizing sacred living systems that we are a part of? The water, the living beings, paying attention to the seasons, recognizing that we are a part of this earth? Are we just acting like germs on a petri dish that are multiplying and multiplying, and making a mess? And so I say this because I'm new to a lot of these conversations. I can't keep up fully in a climate change conversation, but I'm invited to those spaces because my perspective is valued. I was never taught in a colonial system. I was taught in a colonial system. I was never brought up and conditioned. And so someone didn't give me certification on anything. But my perspective is valued because of the rarity of my existence. But my perspective is also valued because I have a connection that's deeper than what I'm trying to project. I'm trying to parallel this to someone who's an amazing artist who may not be grounded in their heritage or environment, but their voice is really important. Their story and truth is valid too. I happen to recognize that my environment and my grounding comes from a source that is deep and connected to this location. Many Indigenous peoples are location-based, place-based. And when we are place-based, we I have witnessed my community attempt to acknowledge and connect to its place by being accountable to everything. And that's by saying, hey, I'm an omnivore. I eat vegetables and I eat meat. That does not mean I can walk the world tiptoeing and not impacting anything. However, I've been brought up in an environment and taught by elders. A little skull behind my head. Easter egg. Sorry. I've been brought up by an environment and community that says if you are going to be accountable, if you are going to be humble, reciprocal to these living systems, then when you have that impact, what are you doing about it? So if I'm going to eat meat, I will attempt not to support the industry that I find disgusting. If I am going to eat plants, I will attempt to support local sustainable methodologies. If I'm going to grow or to have a lot of different medicines, I will attempt to grow as much as I can so I know my sources, but also I will attempt to know my sources. Because in the Bay Area, or just everywhere, like think about how makeup is becoming so popular. Sephora had build your own witch kit. It had an introduction to witch kit where you can get sage and crystals. Oh my gosh, the sage I have, I'll totally cleanse my crystals that were brought up by child labor, and I'll totally smudge them off, and that'll totally like dampen that negative energy and that vibe, and that, you know, zhuzh it up. And then I'll use the crystals and I'll hold them in the moon water, and then I'll bless them. That way, the sage, the negative juju of being clear cut and stolen off of native lands is totally dismissed. And therefore, when I smudge, I'm cool and I can get empowered. And it's just, where's the accountability? We're brought up by a capitalistic, materialistic, disposable society model, of which is not accountable to the rights of nature, of which is divorced from its sense of accountability, of which is not humble, accountable, or reciprocal to the living systems in the world. But indigenous pedagogies teach about this, but we're called primitive. Isn't the primitive action creating a very fast regulatory strategy that doesn't think things through? I think that's primitive. And so I'm curious, for those of you who are taking steps to decolonize, what have you thought about or learned in your journey? Because all of us are on different parts of our journey. We're all either curious about the word decolonization, or what does it mean to uncolonize or to unsettle, because we're all humans of the earth. We're all people in this. We are, in my language, Ama Tira Takawas, people of this land. We are the people of this land right now. However, how are we being accountable and taking steps to honor the indigenous peoples of this land? The original histories of these places and spaces that came to be what we now benefit from and have settled upon. Because there are amazing truths in these lands. And like Western settler colonialism has taught us or shifted our perspective to try and be against each other. Like right now, this political climate is trying to yell at people to go back where they come from. It's like, you do realize the gold rush was in the 1850s. And it wasn't just colonizers and natives, many nations. There's indentured servants, there's slaves, there's people seeking better opportunity. There are people forced into this environment. They didn't want to be here. Some were wanting to be here, but they've been here for generation after generation. So where do they go home? And who cares? We need to talk about truth and history. That's why I care, but who cares as in we're here now. We're together now. What are we doing now? How are we going forward now? How are we honoring the past to shape the future now? And so like an idea of reindigenization. I forgot what territory it is, but it was on the Discovery Channel. It was somewhere in the islands where the lionfish is invading. It's quite invasive and it's taking over. And the commercial fishermen don't want to fish them out because there's no money in it, even though they have the tools and the resources. But what's beautiful is because they don't want to touch the invasive species, the indigenous peoples are slowly hunting and slowly removing this invasive lionfish, and they're eating. That takes a while to take all the barbs, fins off of them, but it's really good meat. And because they're doing it intentionally, they're not damaging the ecology of the coral reef. So it's a good thing that it wasn't a profitized idea, because commercial fishermen will damage the ecological system because they don't come from a place of decision making that's very conducive of the most ideal situation. They don't come from decision making that's very accountable. We've had to put rules in to stop some of their problematic behavior, like dredging canals and multiple net high fish count, net count, huge nets. Words. That being said, Reindigenize is taking a new approach of handling something like, oh, if St. John's wort is invasive and it's classed as a certain type of invasive species, yet St. John's wort could be helpful for pain and to help people. Why can't we make it a sustainable business? Oh wait, the laws say that you can't create anything from it because it is deemed an invasive species, but isn't the logical thing to ensure securing it so it doesn't, the seeds don't disperse, and secure it and create something localized and sustainable? And it's frustrating to me that Indigenous pedagogies are constantly dismissed. Why? Because the narrative we've been taught. The narrative we've been taught dismisses Indigenous peoples and Indigenous wisdoms, therefore sees Indigenous peoples as subhuman, sees and deems them unhuman, and therefore not worthy and invalidated. And then we highlight colonial narratives and say, through hard work and pull yourself up by the bootstraps, will get you in these good places. John Muir, he was praised and has actually part of this property as a conservation site. John Muir was a racist bastard. He wanted all the savages dead. He wanted all the natives dead because he saw what the land could do, even though he was proactive of conserving. Fremont, Vallejo, the names of the cities got their names from being genocidal beings, validating the eradication of natives. And so we need to talk about this to honor truth and history. And it's gonna be uncomfortable, but we also could highlight the beauty of coming together and making decisions that impact us and our next 7 generations in a good way. Because I love visiting classrooms. I get to talk to kids about genocide, and the most amazing things come from them. Ideas around recycling, ideas around upcycling and fixing things like, why do we do this? Or why is that? And a lot of parents might say, this is the way it is. Question it, push back. This is the way it is. Well, has it been very great? Has it been good? Do we like it? If we don't, what are we doing about it? Are we helping? Are we supporting? Are we wanting to create yet another business? We want to be the trailblazer of the new business, even though there might be other community members struggling in the same business, but our ego wants us to be the first. That's happening. So I'm kind of curious. I'm open for questions. I'm open for ideas. How do you honor native land where you're at? Can you? Do you want to? Is it interesting? Is it not? In what ways are we combating this settler mindset that feels entitled to consume and prioritize an economy-driven society? How do we combat that? Unless you want to support that, I mean, you're totally welcome to. I don't know the purpose it serves besides creating more mess and having like little happy highs of like, oh, I got a little toy, I got a little thing, I'm done with it. Just perpetuating entitlement. How are we attempting to be good community members? How are we attempting to be good ancestors in training? So I'm open questions or comments, words or thoughts that hit you. You're welcome to check out other videos I've made because I do talk about core shamanism and how problematic the word shaman is. I have an audio, I have SoundCloud that I'm on. It's a little, I think it's not Coyote Consulting though. I think it's Coyote Woman, I think. Oh yeah. Yes, staying open to receive a no. Oh, shopping for natives. You get a no from one native and then you go shopping for another because you want your answer. or hearing the no. I've had to combat myself in hearing the no. Ooh, that was always hard. I really was motivated. I really wanted to get my answer. And I was like, but I really am focusing on this. This is really what I want to prioritize. And boom, you get that no from that elder. You get that no from that auntie. It's just like, gotta keep working on stuff, other stuff.
Yeah, Kenyon Issa was also talking about asking permission when going to visit a park or the waters, asking permission to be in sacred places. Sorry, Issa was talking about being open to receive a no in practicing introducing themselves to places, parks, waters.
So many of us are brought up in a system where entitlement is a thing, that we have a right to these things. And there are some sacred places that my own cousins and we don't go. Only sacred ceremonial practitioners, and not people who were self-proclaimed sacred practitioners. Oh, I'm a healer, I'm allowed to. Only so many or so few community members were allowed to go to certain sacred places. It's painful to see that, like Mount Diablo. Mount Diablo is a sacred place, and not even like less than 1% of our population were allowed to go up there. And now people are like, I'm entitled to go anytime I want, taking selfies, being on top of the mountain and making trails and littering and damaging the ecology. And it's like, I understand where the mentality of wanting to have access is. I understand the mentality because I partially walk the world with some of that. But we have to understand to take the nodes, like the same way, like this circle is only for these people. Well, why? I want to be a part of it too. Yes, there should be balance. Like, yes, we need to have men's circles. Yes, we need to have women's circles. Yes, we need to have our spaces for our queer and our two-spirit community members. And there is times that we should only have just Indigenous, queer, two-spirit community members who hold a space of a certain format. The same as we only have men's circles of a certain age. We need those. And there are times there will be community members saying, why? Or why can't I be a part of it? Or I feel I should be a part of it. And let's make a rule of all inclusivity. It's like, no, we need inclusive and exclusive spaces. We need to understand the balance of being able to hear the yes, you're included, or let's make an inclusive space and be a part of it, and hear the no. Not everyone's entitled to be a part of Native American ceremony. There are Indigenous peoples around the United States who do not go into sweat lodge, who are not allowed. Or maybe even their women aren't allowed, or their men are. There are nations that do things and don't do things certain ways. And those ways are to be respected. Just because it's different or strange or odd does not mean one is entitled to attempt to change everything, i.e. bring modern day feminism into Indigenous traditional practices. Now, I, as a two-spirit community member, will question the origin of some things, because if I will respect an elder who comes into our land for a ceremony, and if that person is conducting their ceremony their way, I will respect their way. I will not tell them, oh, this is how we go into the circle, or this is how we do this, or this. No, I am entering their circle, their protocol, their practice. Now, if this elder who says that they are Lakota, and then they have a lodge, and then they say traditionally women cover themselves and have a long flowing skirt or a dress, and then they say traditionally here in California that's the way it was, I'll put them in their place. No, I would casually get the heck out of there, because I know he's talking out his ass. Because My ancestors just wore freaking necklaces. My female-bodied ancestors just wore necklaces. We covered ourselves to keep warm, but California is glorious. We wore skirts, yeah. Some of our men were scantily clad. We were naked. Oh my God, cover us, cover us. Oh. Someday I will have the ovaries to walk the world traditionally, just rocking a skirt, tatas out, which I am. I quite am around my communities. I don't feel safe doing so in some other places. And that is my thing, my safety. But guess what? My safety is also about how we are in community. Are we letting our community get away with things? Is it not safe because community is actually not community? Huh. We might have more spaces when we talk about accountability, reciprocity, and humility, huh? We might have spaces where we can establish our standards and patterns, huh? Ooh. Dreaming up a world that we want to be in. I like the idea of that. And so, yeah, I'm here to. What is, a word that you heard, a word that you feel now or in a peak of emotion. Maybe I scratched on some uncomfort. Maybe I was sassy to a topic of some familiarity. Share any word that you're either remembering or feeling or acknowledging. I want. Oh, I heard the audio back. The delay.
Okay, we have about a minute left until 2:30. I'm wondering if we should do a word bath where we can all speak a word that speaks to the way that we were impacted, the way that we're feeling all at once. Yeah. Okay, invite y'all to unmute your microphones and find a word that feels like it distills, encapsulates, summarizes some of what you're marinating on from this session. And take a deep breath in, and on the exhale, speak a word. Okay.
Accountability. Mm-hmm.
Honoring protocol.
Resilience.
Learning.
Calling in.
Digestion. Calling in.
Humbling ourselves.
Humbling. Anybody else want to put their voice in? Cayman, do you want to offer anything else before we close?
Perfect timing. I got a helicopter. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for your time, for your deep listening. Thank you, Kenya, for all the story sharing, for weaving us through spirals and galaxies and constellations of paradigms and practices and thoughts and experience. Thank y'all for sharing your comments and your thoughts in the chats. Please feel free to continue anything that you're wrestling with, that you're sitting with, that you're thinking about, that you're wondering about in the chats in the online space.
It's gonna be a beautiful time.
Check out Canyon at canyonconsulting.com. Is that right? .org. Tavi, we throw that in the chat. I'll throw it in the chat. We'll put it in the online space at 7-2. Check us out later on this afternoon, shortly at 3:30 with Amina Peterson to talk about the body as a sex organ and sexuality as a creation manifestation practice. May we continue to be in these deep conversations of re-indigenizing, decolonizing. Hopefully Kenya will continue dropping in with us throughout our year. We'll continue weaving through Kenyon's teachings and medicines in our Huda episodes and on our practices. Yeah, blessings to your lives, to your ancestries, to your paths forward, to your work in the world. Anybody have anything else to add before we close? Can we just take a moment and close our eyes? And just like sit with that word you spoke, with the feelings you have, with the questions you're sitting with, and just let that energy touch the ground that you're on. Let that energy rise up through you and emanate into your space, into the sky. Invite you to send any positivity, any healing, any transformation that you received today, that you found today in our work together, out into the space around you, to send it to your ancestors, to send it to the people that you live with, the peoples, all the peoples, the creatures, the humans, everybody. And I invite you to sense that transformation in the wind, in the sun, in the stones, in the earth, in the echoing prayers of the indigenous peoples in the land where you are, the echoing prayers of your indigenous peoples of your lineage. And just really breathe some of that energy into your own body and into all the bodies that you're a part of. Thank you so much. Blessings to all of y'all. Ashe. Maybe we'll see you later this afternoon. Maybe we'll see you on Sunday or next Monday or next Thursday for Ancestral Somatics or sometime in the future. Blessings. Thank you again. Coyote Canyon Woman. Coyote Woman. Yee! Oh! Okay, beautiful people. Blessings.